Dear students, now we will talk about bony tissue. It's one of the skeletal tissues which include bony and cartilaginous tissues. So, bony tissue contains cells and also it has intercellular matrix which fills the spaces between the bony cells. Bony matrix includes fibers and ground substance. So bony tissue has structure which is very similar to the structure of cartilaginous tissue and fibrous connective tissue. They also have cells and matrix which is composed of fibers and ground substance. So let's begin from the cells of bony tissue. Here we can see three basic types of connective tissues: fibrous connective tissue, cartilaginous tissue and bony tissue. And all those types of tissues, they have differons. Differon is family of the cells, it's set of the cells of common origin and they have common functions, but they have different age and different degree of maturation. So differon includes set of the cells beginning from the youngest cells, for example stem cells, till old and dying cells, and all cells of the differon, they are the following stages of the maturation. So differons of the connective tissues, they include stem cells, young cells and mature cells. In bony tissue we have osteoprogenitor cells, they are stem cells. Also we have osteoblasts, they are young cells, and mature cells of bony tissue are osteocytes. So osteoprogenitor cells, they become to be osteoblasts, and osteoblasts, they become to be osteocytes. Three following stages of the cell's development. So let's look at those cells and their functions. Here we can see three basic types of bony cells: osteoprogenitor cell, osteoblast, and osteocyte. Three following stages. And also we have four types of cells of bones. It's osteoclast. It's not related with those cells. So there are two branches of cells development in mesenchyme. There are stem cells of mechanocytes and blood stem cells. Stem cells of mechanocytes, they give rise to different basic cells of different connective tissues. For example, fibrogenic differon of fibrous connective tissue derives from stem cells of mechanocytes, as well as chondrogenic differon of cartilaginous tissue. Chondroblasts, chondrocytes, they also derive from stem cells of mechanocytes. And also osteogenic differon derives from stem cells of mechanocytes. Here we can see three basic types of connective tissue: fibrous connective tissue, cartilaginous and bony tissue. And here we can see cartilaginous, and here we can see fibrogenous differon, cartilaginous differon and bony differon. And those differons, they derive from stem cells of mechanocytes. And also mesenchyme has another branch of development. There are blood stem cells. And blood stem cells, they give rise to all formed elements of blood, including leukocytes. And monocytes, kind of leukocytes, they may develop in the macrophages of connective tissue, and some monocytes, they migrate into the bones. There they are fused and they form osteoclasts, which are also cells of the bones. So here we can see one branch of stem cells development of mesenchyme. There are osteogenic cells and osteogenic differon, and osteoclasts, they develop from stem cells of blood. So let's begin from osteoblasts. Here we have osteogenic cells. They are stem cells, they are flattened, and then during their development they enlarge their volume, they develop their cytoplasm, and they become to be osteoblasts. They are the most active cells of the bone. They usually are located on the surface of the bone. Here we can see bone particle, it's bone trabecula, and surface of this bone is covered with osteoblasts. They have well-developed cytoplasm because they produce bone matrix. They are located on the surface of the bone and they produce matrix which underlies those cells. There are osteoblasts. Also, osteoblasts may be non-active, they may be flattened, and they are called bone lining cells. So bone lining cells are kind of osteoblasts, but bone lining cells are inactive, and that's why they have smaller volume of cytoplasm. But active osteoblasts, they have cuboid or even columnar shape, and they usually are located on the surface of the bone, inner or outer. And osteoblasts, they aren't surrounded with mineralized matrix, they are located on the surface. And then they begin to produce matrix. Some osteoblasts, they are surrounded with matrix and they become to be osteocytes. Osteocytes, they are completely surrounded with matrix, they are located deeper. So here we can see osteoblasts, they are located on the surface, and osteocytes, they are located inside the bony trabecula. Here we can see bony trabecula, it's particle of the bony tissue, and surface is covered with osteoblasts. Inside we have osteocytes. Here we can see osteoblast, it's superficial cell. Here we can see this cell, and it covers the surface of the bone, and their main function is production of the matrix of the bony tissue. And then they are going deeper. They surround themselves with matrix, and now they are called osteocytes. Osteocytes, they don't produce bony matrix. They are inactive cells, particularly inactive cells. They are resting cells. They cannot produce new matrix because they are already surrounded with matrix. They are located in bony lacuna. Here we can see cavity in the bone, it's bony lacuna, and they haven't place where they can produce this matrix. So what are they doing? They maintain the homeostasis of the connective of the bony tissue. They are located in lacuna and they maintain the homeostasis. They have long projections processes which are located in the bony canaliculi. Here we have a bony lacuna, and there are canaliculi which contain processes of the bony cells. So there are osteocytes. Here we can see them. Here we can see osteocyte. It's located in lacuna. It's cavity filled with some fluid which is like plasma of blood, but it's not plasma of blood, it's inner environment of the bony tissue. It's osteocyte, and there are projections or processes of this osteocyte and canaliculi of the bone. Why there are canaliculi? They provide circulation of this fluid inside the bone, and different nutrients they get to osteocytes via those canaliculi. So it's necessary for the nutrition of the osteocytes which are located inside the bony matrix. And here we can see osteocyte. It's located in the lacuna. It has long processes. It's cavity lacuna and canaliculi which surround this lacuna. And also here we can see osteocytes. Their bodies are located in lacuna and numerous long and thin processes. So there are osteocytes. They have progenitors. There are osteoprogenitor cells. They are flattened and they aren't very numerous. They are stem cells. Osteoblasts, active osteoblasts, they produce new bone, new matrix. They are cuboidal or even columnar, and they have two ways of their development. They may enter in the bony matrix and become to be osteocytes, or they may be resting cells on the surface of the bone, and those cells are known as bone lining cells. So bone lining cells are inactive osteoblasts. They are located on the surface, but they have flattened shape, and they now don't produce matrix, new matrix. So inactive osteoblasts are bone lining cells. They are present in the periosteum, in the endosteum inside the bone, and in some textbooks you can find information that bone lining cells are kind of osteoblasts. In other textbooks there is an information that bone lining cells are distinct group of the cells. So they derive from active osteoblasts, but they are inactive. They don't produce new matrix, but they maintain the homeostasis, and also they provide formation of a barrier between bony tissue and surrounding tissues. So here we can see cells of osteogenic differon. And also we have osteoclasts. Here we can see osteoclast. It's a supracellular structure. It derives from some monocytes of blood. They migrate into the bones and they are fused and they form osteoclasts. Here we can see this cell. It's huge cell and it has numerous nuclei, we can see them, and also it has folded membrane. Here we can see folded membrane, and via this membrane osteoclast releases different hydrolytic enzymes and also acids, and they provide destruction of the bone. This destruction of the bone is called resorption of the bone resorption. Here we can see osteoclast, and here it produces different substances which dissolve underlying bone. And here we can see resorption lacuna cavity, which is formed after osteoclast release of the hydrolytic enzymes. So why do we need this bone resorption? During our entire life, bones undergo remodeling. New bony particles are produced, new parts of the bone matrix are produced, and old parts of the bones, they are destroyed. So it's called rebuilding or bone remodeling. So during all our life we have remodeling of the bones, and osteoclasts, they provide this bone remodeling. They destroy old bone, they destroy bones where they are not needed, some particles of the bone, not entire bone, and it's main function of the osteoclast. And after that, osteoblasts, they produce new matrix, new bone. So it's called remodeling of the bones. And let's look at osteoclasts. Here we can see osteoclast. It has numerous nuclei, it has folded membrane, and it's region where it produces different enzymes and acids. Here we can see inactive osteoclast, osteoclast activation, and it produces enzymes. And here we can see lacuna of resorption, or Hauschip's lacuna. It's result of the work of osteoclast. And here we can see osteoclast and its lacuna inside the bony trabecula, where osteoclast has dissolved this bony tissue. Here we can see bone, surface of the bone, and its resorption lacuna, where osteoclasts are working. And look here, we can see osteoblasts, which are producing new matrix. So it's called bone remodeling. And here we can see also osteoclast and its lacuna after bone resorption. Also osteoclast and bony lacuna. Here we can see also osteoclast and destroyed bone. Here we can see osteoclast and its lacuna after bone resorption. Also osteoclast and way of the osteoclast on the surface of the bone. Here we can see huge lacuna after bone resorption. And here we can see bony trabecula. Surface of this bony trabecula is covered with osteoblasts. They are active in this case. Osteocytes are inside the bony trabecula, and on the surface of this bone, here we can see osteoclast. It provides resorption of the bone, this one and this one. And also here we can see osteoclast, osteocytes, and its zone of bone resorption. Osteoblasts, numerous active osteoblasts, osteocytes inside the bone, and osteoclasts, which provide bone resorption. And now we are going to the bone matrix. There are cells, numerous cells, and also there is matrix which fills the space between the bony cells. It has organic and inorganic part, its chemical composition, and also bone matrix. It has fibers and ground substance. Here we can see a diagram of the matrix which shows main components of fibrous connective tissue matrix. There are ground substance and fibers which are collagen, elastic, and reticular. Cartilaginous tissue has collagen and elastic fibers, but bony tissue it has only collagen fibers. So matrix it has fibers, collagen fibers, and ground substance which fills the spaces between collagen fibers and cells. It's main components of bony matrix. So one more feature, one more specific characteristic of the bony matrix, it's that ground substance is mineralized. So collagen fibers, they provide formation of organic part of the bony matrix, and ground substance is mainly mineralized and it's mainly inorganic part of the matrix. But also ground substance may include GAGs, glycosaminoglycans, proteoglycans, different proteins, but the biggest volume is taken by different salts, different mineral substances. And here we can see collagen fibers. They provide formation of the organic part of the bony matrix. Here we can see collagen fibers. And between them there is ground substance. And here ground substance is mainly mineralized. Here we can see collagen fibers. There are fibers, organic part. And there are molecules of different crystals of different minerals, different salts, mainly calcium and others. So here we can see structure of the matrix of bony tissue. And here we can see non-mineralized bone. Minerals were removed, and here we can see that organic part, collagen fibers, they provide flexibility of the bone. And without organic substances, our bones may be like ceramics. They may be broken easily. And inorganic substances, minerals, they provide density of the bones. That's why we need both components of bony matrix. So here we can see different cells, and there is a bony matrix, and exactly bony matrix provides different features and different functions of the bony tissue. Its density, and it helps to provide maintenance of our organs, of our skeleton, and also its storage of calcium and in other inorganic substances. So after the activation of osteoclasts, they may dissolve some part of the matrix of the bony tissue, and those salts, they will enter in the peripheral blood. So it's the main functions of the bony matrix. And now let's go to the development of the bones, and this process is called osteogenesis, or ossification, or bone formation. So here we can see name of this bone development, and there are two ways or two patterns of ossification. We have intramembranous ossification or direct ossification, and endochondral ossification, which is indirect. Direct ossification has two stages. First stage is mesenchyme, development of mesenchymal cells, and second stage is direct development of bone inside mesenchyme. And that's why we call this direct. And another way, it's endochondral ossification or indirect ossification. There are three stages. Here we can see first stage, it's mesenchyme, second cartilage, and third is bone. So we have second additional stage, intermediate stage of development of cartilage. Mesenchymal cells, they develop into the cartilage model of the bone, and only then bone is developed on the place of cartilage. Why do we have two patterns of the bone development? Cartilage hasn't blood vessels, and it doesn't need a lot of oxygen. It doesn't need good blood supply. That's why cartilage may develop without well-developed blood vessels. But bones, they need blood vessels, they need good blood supply. And let's look here. Direct ossification may occur only in skull bones, only here, and all other bones, they have indirect way of the ossification, it's endochondral ossification. And why do we have this localization? Look here. Near the skull bones, under the skull bones, we have developing brain. And developing brain, it has very good blood supply during embryogenesis. That's why this developing brain, it has good blood supply, and direct development of the bone in the place of the mesenchyme is possible. So bone develops directly on the place of mesenchyme because blood vessels are present here and they are well developed. In this way, in the endochondral ossification, we need cartilaginous stage, cartilaginous model. Why? Because in other places of the embryo, blood supply on early stages is not enough for the direct development of the bones. That's why cartilage models are developed. Here we can see them, and then cartilage is replaced by the bone. That's why all other bones, they have cartilaginous stage of their development. And those cartilaginous models, they are made up of hyaline cartilage. So hyaline cartilaginous tissue later is replaced by bony tissue. So first, it's intramembranous ossification or direct ossification, direct development of bone inside the mesenchyme. Here you can see mesenchymal cells, it's embryonic connective tissue, and stem cells of mechanocytes. Some of them, they have osteogenic direction of their development, osteogenic cells, and they form groups of cells. It's called osteogenic islet. Here we can see development of the osteogenic islet, and some of those cells, they enter inside the islet, and they are surrounded with matrix. It's organic matrix of the bone, and this matrix, non-mineralized matrix, is called osteoid. And later this osteoid is mineralized. Here we can see mineralized osteoid, and this is bony trabecula, which develops after the formation of osteogenic islet. And here we can see bony trabecula. It's result of intramembranous ossification. It's mesenchyme, and inside mesenchyme we have bony trabecula. Look here, there are numerous blood vessels. There are blood vessels. They provide good blood supply. And there are bony trabecula. You can see them here. And they are covered with osteoblasts. Here they cover the bony trabecula. Also, we can see here osteoclasts, because rebuilding of this bony trabecula is going on. Also, and osteocytes are present inside bony trabecula. So this development and this localization of the bony cells is present even in mature bone. And here you can see the result of intramembranous ossification. This type of bony tissue is called woven bone or immature bone, and later it will be replaced by lamellar bone, and we'll talk about this later. Another way of ossification, it's endochondral ossification, is development on the place of the pre-existing cartilage model. So here we can see cartilage model. It's made up of hyaline cartilage, and all bones except those bones which have direct way of ossification, all those bones, they have cartilaginous model. And those cartilage, those models, they are growing. But cartilage, it hasn't good blood supply. It may survive without good blood supply, but inside this cartilage model cells, they begin to suffer from hypoxia, blood deficiency. They don't receive nutrients, they don't receive oxygen. That's why they are dying inside the cartilage, deepest regions of the cartilage. And then blood vessels are growing here, and first of all they bring here osteogenic cells, and osteogenic cells, they surround diaphysis of the bone, and first of all bone develops near the diaphysis. It surrounds the cartilaginous bone. So it's diaphysis, ossification of diaphysis, superficial layer of diaphysis. And after this, blood vessels are growing inside the cartilage. They are growing here, and osteogenic cells and also osteoclasts, they are migrating here. Osteoclasts, they destroy this cartilage. They form marrow cavity, and also they form cavities for the developing bone. And here we can see primary ossification center, when osteogenic cells are migrating here and they form ossification center. So it's ossification center inside the diaphysis. And here we can see primary ossification center, it's cartilaginous bone, cartilaginous model of the bone, and here we can see the central part of the bone, it undergoes ossification. And after that, blood vessels are growing in the epiphysis. Here we can see epiphyseal center of ossification, for example here in deep regions of the epiphysis, and its secondary ossification center. Here we can see secondary and primary ossification center. Primary ossification center usually is present in diaphysis, secondary in the epiphysis of the long bones. So what do we see here? Here we can see primary ossification center and secondary, it's epiphysis, it's diaphysis. All pink regions, they are bony regions, and blue or violet, light violet regions are made up of hyaline cartilage. So here we can see cartilaginous part in the epiphysis, and it's bony ossification center, secondary in the epiphysis, and its ossification in the diaphysis. Bony part is covered with periosteum, cartilaginous part is covered with perichondrium. And there are numerous blood vessels. Look here, where is bone? There are numerous blood vessels. Cartilage is a vascular tissue. It hasn't blood vessels. Then secondary centers, ossification centers, they are growing and they completely replace epiphysis. And we have bony diaphysis, bony epiphysis, and thin layer between epiphysis and diaphysis. This region between epiphysis and diaphysis, it's epiphyseal cartilage or epiphyseal plate. Here we can see this epiphyseal plate, it's epiphysis, bony epiphysis, it's bony diaphysis, and this epiphyseal plate. It's present in children after birth, and it's present in bones during puberty till the end of our growth. Why do we have this region? This epiphyseal plate provides growth of the bones in the longitudinal direction. This cartilage is growing and later it's replaced by bony tissue, and it provides growth of our bones. So when we are growing, we have these epiphyseal plates in our bones. When we are not growing, these epiphyseal plates in the bones, they are completely replaced by bony tissue. Here we can see epiphysis and its diaphysis, and between them there is epiphyseal disc. It's hyaline cartilage, and it's not only embryonic structure. This epiphyseal disc also is present in bones of children and in teenagers till the end of our growth, but it's a little bit individual. And this epiphyseal disc has some regions. So first, the most superficial region, it's resting cartilage. It's cartilage which hasn't any changes. Deeper region, it's zone of proliferating chondrocytes. Chondrocytes, cartilaginous cells, they are proliferating. They are undergoing numerous mitotic divisions. Here we can see them, and it's a region of the cartilage growth. Deeper, there is zone of chondrocyte hypertrophy. Here we can see this zone. Next, it's zone of cell death. Chondrocytes are dying here. Deeper, we have zone of vascular invasion, where blood vessels are growing inside the metaepiphyseal plate or epiphyseal disc. And the deepest zone is zone of mixed spicules. It's zone of the developing bone. And here bone develops in the way of intermembranous ossification. There are osteogenic islets, there are bony trabecula with the same structure. Almost the same. So it's rebuilding of the cartilage into bone, and bone underlies this metaepiphyseal plate or epiphyseal disc. And here we can see X-ray at embryo, human embryo, and here we can see skull bones. They are undergoing direct ossification. They are present here. And all other bones, they have cartilaginous model. They have endochondral type of ossification, and we can see ossified parts of the bones. They are calcified, they are ossified, and some parts of the bones are invisible. Why they are invisible? Because now they are cartilaginous. They are made up of hyaline cartilage, and later this hyaline cartilage will be replaced by matrix of bony tissue. So bony tissue will replace the cartilage. And here we can see X-ray of bones of child, and here we can see secondary ossification center. It's epiphysis and it's diaphysis of the long bone. And there is a deep line between epiphysis and diaphysis. This dark line, it's epiphyseal disc. It's invisible on X-ray because it's not mineralized. And primary and secondary ossification centers, they are mineralized and they are visible. So it's zone of the growth, bone growth. Why we should know about this zone? Because we may use this zone to detect age, bony age, and to detect, to describe, is this person growing? Are the bones of this person growing, or the growth of the bones is finished? So here we can see hand of child and hand of adult, and let's compare. There are bones and its epiphyseal disc. Here we can see dark line. So this baby is growing. Bones of this baby are growing. And here we can see bones which haven't epiphyseal disc. It's replaced by bony tissue, and it's hand of adult, and this person isn't growing. After the bone formation, in direct or in the indirect ways, all those bones, they undergo rebuilding. It's primary bone, and primary bone is remodeled. It undergoes remodeling, and it becomes to be secondary or mature bone. And almost all bones of adults, they are made up of secondary bony tissue, but also there are places where primary or immature bone also is present. So we are going to the classification of bony tissue. And as you already know, we classify bony tissue into two types: immature or woven bone, and mature or lamellar bone, or primary and secondary. In mature woven bone, it's those bone which develops during osteogenesis, during ossification, and later it undergoes rebuilding into mature lamellar bone, which has more minerals. It's more mineralized than this. In mature woven bone, it has more collagen fibers. And also, let's compare the structure. This bone, it has only trabecula, but this bone, it has lamella, or layers of something. Matrix is divided into lamella or lamina, layers of matrix, and it provides stronger properties of the matrix of mature lamellar bone. So those bones, they are stronger than this. Here we can see classification. So bony tissue is divided into immature woven bone and mature or lamellar bone, and it has two kinds: spongy and compact bone. So let's begin from immature woven bone. Here we can see the structure of immature woven bone. It has numerous cells, and there are osteocytes inside the bone. Also there are osteoblasts which cover bony trabecula. Also osteoclasts are present there. So the result of ossification, first result of ossification, direct or indirect, it's formation of immature woven bone. And here we can see this bone. All fetal bones are made up of immature woven bone, but also adults have this type of bony tissue. Where do we have this type of bony tissue? We have this between bones of the skull. Synostosis of the skull, they are made up of immature woven bone, primary bone. Also, this bone, it surrounds roots of teeth here, and also places where tendons are attached to the bones. Also, in those places, bones are containing immature woven bone. There are places where adults do have fetal type of bony tissue. And all fetal bones, they are made up of immature woven bony tissue. And almost all bones of adults, except these places, are made up of mature or lamellar bone or secondary bone. And this bone is called lamellar bone because it's made up of lamella. Here we can see lamella. There are plates with one predominant direction of collagen fibers. One layer, one direction. Another layer, it has another direction. And layer by layer, we can see this layered structure. And those layers of the matrix, they are called lamella. Between lamella, we can see osteocytes, so lacuna of osteocytes in this specific type of bony tissue. They are located between lamella, in the spaces, in the gaps between lamella. So lamella, layer of osteocytes in those lacuna, in their lacuna. Next lamella, next layer of osteocytes lacuna. So here we can see numerous layers of bony lamella. They have different directions of collagen fibers, and it provides strongest properties of bony tissue. It's much stronger than bone. Those lamella, they may be organized in different patterns. And let's look here. Here we can see bone, and in this part it has spongy structure. That's why we call this type of mature bone spongy bone. And here lamella are organized compactly, and we call this type of bone compact bone. So secondary bony tissue, it has two conditions or two patterns of organization of lamella: compact and spongy localization. That's why we have two types of secondary bony tissue, compact and spongy bone. So mature lamellar bone has spongy and compact kinds. And they have different pattern of lamella organization, spongy and compact bone, and they have different structural units of its kinds. So spongy bone, it has bony trabecula. Those bony trabecula, they are a little bit like bony trabecula of immature bone. Here we can see bony trabecula, three-dimensional network of some trabecula. It's spongy bone. And structural unit of compact bone, it's osteon. So let's begin from spongy bone and development of bony trabecula. Here we can see organization of bony trabecula. They form three-dimensional network or spongy structure, and there are trabecula. They are made up of lamella. They are layers of matrix, and between those layers there are lacuna with osteocytes. And trabecula generally is covered with osteoblasts, active when this trabecula is growing, or inactive or bone lining cells. So it's endostome which covers the bony trabecula, and also osteoclasts may be present here. Here we can see trabecula and circular localization of lamella. Here we can see layers which are called lamella. There are osteocytes inside or between lamella. They are inside bony lacuna, and lamella. Layer of lamella, layer of bony lacuna with osteocytes. Also next layer of lamella, and layer of lacuna with osteocytes. And superficial zone is covered with osteoblasts. They are building new lamella. So growth of the trabecula begins from the middle to the peripheral side, to peripheral region of bony trabecula. And let's look at the growth of bony trabecula. Here we can see central lamella, and osteocytes are located between two lamella. But osteoblasts, they are building new lamella, and some osteoblasts, they stay here and they become to be osteocytes. They build new lacuna for themselves, but another osteoblasts, they are going to they make one step to the peripheral side, and they produce new lamella. So step by step they build lamella of the trabecula, and formation of trabecula begins from the center, from the central lamella, and step by step osteoblasts, they are forming new lamella, and that's why osteoblasts, they cover bony trabecula, and osteocytes, they were osteoblasts which have stayed here. They are standing here and they are present in the lacuna. So some generations they are going to new lamella, and some generations they become to be osteocytes and they stay between lamella. It's formation of bony trabecula of spongy lamellar bone. Here we can see that this lamella is covered with osteoblasts, which are building new lamella, and they will make one step here, and some of them will become to be osteocytes, like those osteocytes which are present in the deeper parts of the bony trabecula. And here we can see microphotograph of the spongy bone. it's mature spongy bone, it's intervertebral disc. Here we have spongy bone, and there are cavities between the bony trabecula. Here we can see bony trabecula and cavities between them, which are filled with red bone marrow. And there are trabecula, and deeper we can see hyaline cartilage and fibrocartilage. It's intervertebral disc, and here we can see spongy bone of the vertebra. And also here we can see bony trabecula. They form three-dimensional network with cavities between bony trabecula, and cavities are filled with red bone marrow and in some cases with yellow bone marrow. And we are going to the compact bone. Here we can see trabecular or spongy bone. There are bony trabecula, there are spaces, but here we can see that lamella are organized in another pattern and they form osteons. So structural unit of the compact bone, it's osteon. Here we can see osteon. It's cylindric structure with also concentric localization of the bony lamella, but it has little bit different pattern of the development and organization. Here we can see osteon. It's cylindric structure. It's made up of lamella, bony lamella, but it has canal inside. It's Haversian canal or Haversian system, and this canal, it contains blood vessels and nerves, and it's filled with loose connective tissue which is located inside this canal. And there are concentric lamella which surround this canal. So bony trabecula, they haven't this canal, and osteons, they have canal inside. Here we can see Haversian canal, and also here there are blood vessels and nerves, and this canal is surrounded with lamella with different direction of the collagen fibers. Here we can see canal and bony lamella which surround this canal, and number of these lamella may be different. And here we can see Haversian canals and lamella of the osteons. Those black points are osteocytes in their lacuna. Here we can see them, and also they are present between neighboring lamella. So let's look at growth of osteon. Bony trabecula begins, it grows from the central lamella to the peripheral, but in osteon we have opposite pattern of the growth. We have wide canal of the osteon, and first produced lamella is the outermost. Here we can see blood vessel, it's growing here, and it's outermost lamella which is newly produced. When osteoblasts have built this lamella, they make one step to the central canal and they produce new lamella. And some osteoblasts, they stay between the lamella and they become to be osteocytes. Then they produce new lamella, next lamella, and step by step they make canal of the osteon smaller and number of lamella increases. So young osteon, it has wide Haversian canal and small number of the bony lamella, and mature osteons, they have a lot of lamella and thin Haversian canal. Here we can see growth of the osteons. Here we can see blood vessel, and osteogenic cells, they migrate from blood vessel and they form lamella. Here we can see newly produced lamella, and they surround this osteon and they make mature osteon. There are numerous lamella, and between them there are osteocytes in bony lacuna. And here we can see osteon, it's Haversian canal, it's blood vessel inside, and there are numerous lamella which surround this blood vessel, and there are osteocytes between bony lamella. Here we can see them, and osteoblasts, they are present in the Haversian canal, active when this osteon is growing, or in mature osteons, they become to be bone lining cells. They are mature or resting osteoblasts. They are present near blood vessel of the Haversian canal. Here we can see Haversian canal and numerous lamella which surround it. And there are lacuna with osteocytes. Osteocytes aren't visible here, but we can see lacuna, openings between the lacuna, between the lamella. And here we can see the Haversian canal and numerous lamella which surround this Haversian canal. There are osteocytes and canaliculi which contain processes of osteocytes. Here we can see osteon. This is one osteon, another osteon, and numerous osteocytes which are located between lamella of the osteon. So Haversian canals, and here we can see numerous osteons of bony tissue. We have Haversian canal which provides nutrition for this osteon, but neighboring osteons, they also have communication. So we can see another canal which provides communication between two neighboring Haversian canals. This canal is called Volkmann's canal. It provides communication between neighboring osteons. It's system of blood supply of the bone. So here we can see osteons. Here we can see them, Haversian canals, and Volkmann's canal, which provides connection between neighboring osteons. And also it's Volkmann's canal between neighboring Haversian canals. Haversian canal and Volkmann's canal. And also between the osteons there are some particles which fill the space between osteons because osteons are round, and those places between them, they aren't empty, they aren't filled with bone marrow like in the spongy bone. So what do we have here? Here we can see old osteons, and you know that bone undergoes rebuilding during our entire life. So old osteons are destroyed and new osteons arise. And let's look how it's going on. Here we can see newly arised osteons, and they particularly replace pre-existing osteons. They are destroyed. And here we can see result of this production, this formation of new osteons. There are newly produced osteons, and between them there are particles of pre-existing osteons. Here we can see them. They are present between new osteons, and they are called intercalated lamella. Here we can see intercalated or interstitial lamella. They fill the spaces between new young osteons. So they derive from pre-existing osteons. They aren't destroyed. They fill this space. So here we can see osteons, and there are lamella, intercalated or interstitial lamella, which develop from pre-existing osteons. And here we can see Haversian system and interstitial or intercalated lamella. And here we can even find circular pattern of localization of lamella, because they were lamella of pre-existing osteons. So here we can see Haversian systems or osteons, and there are intercalated or interstitial lamella between them. So spaces aren't empty, they are filled with particles of pre-existing osteons. And now let's discuss what is the structure of the bone as an organ. You should know that there is bony tissue, and also there are bones, which you have studied at anatomy. So what is the structure of the bone as an organ? And here we can see two principal kinds of the bones. At anatomy you have studied that there are different kinds of the bones, and in histology we classify them into two big groups. We classify them into long bones and all others, short bones, flat bones, spongy bones, etc. So we divide them into two big groups, long and short bones. So what is the structure of short bones? They are made up mainly of spongy bony tissue. Here we can see it, and it's covered with compact bone. It covers spongy bone, and periosteum covers this layer of compact bone, and inner spaces of spongy bony tissue are lined with endosteum. So endosteum lines cavities inside spongy bone, and periosteum covers this bone outside. Compact bone forms outer and inner coverings of this bone, and inner content is spongy bone, spongy bony tissue. And long bones, they have epiphysis and they have diaphysis. Epiphysis, they have structure which is a like structure of short bones. Here we can see epiphysis of the long bone. It has covering which is composed of compact bone, and inner content it's spongy bony tissue, compact and spongy. And the diaphysis is completely made up of compact bony tissue. So it's needed to provide bigger density of this region of the bone. But epiphyses, they have inner filling with spongy bony tissue. And also epiphyses are covered with periostrum, and endostrum lines the cavities inside spongy bony tissue. And diaphysis is covered with periostrum, and inside it's lined with endostrum. Cavity of the bone marrow is lined with endostrum, and there is a wall of the long bone. Here we can see a cross section of the long bone in the region of the diaphysis. And in this region, bone has 5 layers. The outermost layer is periostrum. Here we can see it, it covers bone, and periostrum, it provides growth of the bones in the transverse direction. Growth of the bones in longitudinal direction is provided by epiphyseal disc. Here we can see place in the epiphysis where epiphyseal disc was present, and now it's replaced by bony tissue. And growth of the bones in the transverse direction is provided by periostrum. So periostrum, it covers bone. Under the periostrum we have external circumferential lamella. Lamella which are alike lamella of the osteons, but they surround entire bone, entire perimeter of the bone. Next, the biggest layer, it's osteonic layer. Here we can see osteonic layer, there are numerous osteons, and their long axis, longitudinal axis, corresponds to the longitudinal axis of the bone. It provides bigger mechanical properties, better mechanical properties of the bone. It's osteonic layer, middle layer. Next layer, it's internal circumferential lamella, alike external one. They also surround all entire inner perimeter of the bone. They surround marrow cavity. And the innermost layer, it's endostrum. It lines bone marrow cavity of the bone. So periostrum, endostrum, external and internal circumferential lamella, and the middle layer, it's osteonic layer. What is periostrum? Periostrum, it's a special layer of the bone which covers the bone. It has fibrous layer which contains collagen fibers, so it's dense connective tissue. And inner layer, it's osteogenic layer. It's located under the fibrous layer, and osteogenic layer contains different osteogenic cells, osteoprogenitor cells, osteoblasts, bone lining cells. Osteoblasts active or inactive, this layer provides growth of the bones in the transverse direction. It's periostrum. What are the functions? Growth of the bones, also protection of the bone, and also nutrition of the bone, because periostrum has a lot of blood vessels, and also some blood vessels, they pass through the periostrum and they enter in the bony tissue, and they are distributed inside the bone. And also we have endostrum. What is endostrum? It's a special layer which is described as connective tissue layer, which contains also osteogenic cells and also bone lining cells. Where do we find endostrum? It lines bone marrow cavity inside the bone. Here it's present. It covers all bony trabecula of spongy bone. And also it lines Haversian and Volkmann's canals. All cavities inside the bones are lined with endostrum, and all surfaces inside the bone are covered with endostrum. So there are tightly located bone lining cells, including active and non-active osteoblasts, and some osteogenic cells, and all these cells are covered with thin layer of connective tissue. It's called endostrum, special layer which lines all cavities inside the bone. And here we can see osteons, and there are endosteal linings of the Haversian canals, and it's trabecula of the spongy bone. Here we can see compact bone and spongy bone, and this trabecula also is covered with endostrum. So everything inside the bone has covering or lining of endostrum, and entire bone outside is covered with periostrum. So students, we have discussed bony tissue and also structure of the bones as an organs. Thank you for your attention.